You're listening to the Labor Notes Podcast, our weekly show on rank and file news and organizing tactics. I'm Natasha Laney-Ullman, a staff writer at Labor Notes.
And I'm Danielle Smith, an organizer at Labor Notes.
I can't believe we've been doing this for a whole year. We're 52 episodes, tens of thousands of downloads, and 2 aspirational pod smoking jackets into this project. And it feels like only a matter of time before someone declares us the Labor Joe Rogan.
I'm mentally preparing for Gavin Newsom's team to hit us up on his Putting Out 2028 Feelers trail. For those listening for the first time, welcome. What a great time to get familiar with the Labor Notes program leading up to our 2026 conference in Chicago this June, and also with what we do here on the pod. I mean, besides pretending we're lounging in smoking jackets in the literal steward's corner, as Natasha was alluding to before.
Wearing a smoking jacket is a state of mind.
Totally. P.S. Be sure to check out our Stewards Corner episodes for organizing advice and running jokes on our stewards' personas. It's totally worth it. The organizing part, at least.
I will say, talking about and hearing from workers on the pod has been a refuge of sanity during an otherwise incredibly destabilizing time. I think lately, many of us have been, at least privately, kind of questioning even our most basic assumptions about how our society functions. And maybe we're even wondering, what's the point of anything we're doing right now? How do we organize when the boss runs roughshod over its obligations in a collective bargaining agreement, or tries to just rip it up as the federal government did a year ago with an executive order invalidating the CBAs of over 1 million federal workers? How do we rally and step up for our immigrant neighbors and coworkers being brutalized by an extensive campaign of state terror, as even New York Times op-ed writers are calling it lately? Not to mention trying to show solidarity with our siblings in Gaza reckoning with a genocide. How do we gather ourselves as a public and a movement to resist? Hearing from workers each week who are organizing to move their coworkers on workplace issues, on making their unions better, on getting better framing and facts on political issues is giving me so much hope.
I feel the same way, and I think the stories we've tried to highlight on the pod over the past year lay out almost like a blueprint for what a fight back looks like. What building a more resilient democratic culture in our workplaces and our unions look like, and what it means to keep going. Since we're in this nostalgic place, let's go all out. Natasha, why don't you share some of your favorite stories on the pod, and then I have a few of my own, and then we'll hear from our pod producer, Sindhu, who is joining again for this very special anniversary episode.
Thanks for letting me crash the pod again.
Glad to have you. I'll go with some of my favorite examples of fight back in this era that we've talked about on the pod. I can't believe this was only last month, though it feels like forever ago now, but it was really moving to hear from our coworkers, Luis Feliz Leon and Diana Varnick, who both went to Minneapolis for the Day of Action on January 23rd, and were there that weekend when federal agents shot and killed ICU nurse Alex Preddy. In our pod episode on February 6th, titled How Workers Pulled Off a Mass Strike in Minnesota, Diana and Luis talked about how the workers they heard from, including postal workers, transit workers, teachers, and so many others. These workers all described how the federal occupation had affected their lives. This wasn't abstract to them, and it wasn't just about protesting Trump. These raids were happening in their workplaces and bringing real danger to their daily lives and even their morning commutes. And it was clarifying to hear how that day of no work, no school, no shopping happened on January 23rd. Not just as a social media call-out or comms campaign that went viral. As Luis was saying, workers in highly targeted sectors like the building trades and service industry were already staging these work stoppages, and then unions and community groups helped bring things together to fan those embers into a mass strike.
I love that episode. It was such a good reminder that workers need to be in motion, talking to each other, organizing, coming up with shared demands, assessing their leverage, and acting together once they've built up to that point. And public support in escalating the narrative online and through media channels comes after. It doesn't really work if it's the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. Another important fightback story we've been covering is, of course, that of workers in the Federal Unionist Network. We had our coworker, Jenny Brown, who's been covering federal workers on the pod a few times, on to talk about their organizing throughout a year in which hundreds of thousands of federal workers have been laid off, as agencies have been defunded, career civil servants have been replaced with political appointees, and CBAs trashed, as we talked about earlier. But all of this has only spurred federal workers to get involved and organize. Membership at the American Federation of Government Employees, or AFG, and other public sector unions increased sharply last year after Trump took office again. And as Jenny has said, federal workers have been mobilizing behind No Kings and other rallies at agencies being attacked, including the EPA and at VA hospitals, and they've been connecting with each other and providing support by holding gatherings in person across agencies and unions. But I'm also still thinking about something Jenny said on our episode on October 24th titled, "Are Democrats Sucking Up the Shutdown?" about how these federal workers have been educating the public right now and working hard to reframe the narrative and the vilification of public service work. As she said, quote,
"This has been a chance for them to communicate that they are real people who care about their jobs, serving and protecting the public, and to really explain what they do and how important it is, whether that's something like stopping lead and mercury contamination or enforcing laws against housing discrimination." It's been a great way to push against this sort of faceless bureaucrat image that's being pushed by the administration.
It's so moving, it hurts your heart, but in a good way too. We'll link those episodes in our episode description. I wanted to talk about the stories we featured that are kind of core to the Labor Notes mission of putting the movement back in the labor movement. That basically means supporting workers who want a voice in their unions, who want to know what's going on in bargaining, and who want to build power with their coworkers and be actively involved in making sure the union really fights hard for them and that they are the union. And at a time that union density is still low, still just about 10% in 2025, according to data last month from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it might be tempting to think of this as a nice to have when it feels like we should be directing all our focus to new organizing. But labor's power and even appeal to workers comes from unions' ability to actually deliver meaningful wins for members, to actively fight for their demands, and to fundamentally be places where workers have democratic power. I'm thinking of the episode that our coworker Lisa Shu was on, where she talked about what it would mean for a union like the UFCW, that's the United Food and Commercial Workers, to actually mobilize and energize its 1.2 million members, which makes it the second largest private sector union. That was in an episode we ran on June 6th titled, "Grocery Workers at the UFCW Are Organizing for a Fighting Union." Here's how Lisa put it.
So if we had a rejuvenated UFCW from top to bottom with active leadership and an active shop floor, the whole U.S. labor movement could look very different. And UFCW members are in every community. We have grocery workers, meatpacking workers all across the U.S. So we need the same kind of transformation in the UFCW that we've seen in the UAW and the Teamsters.
We talked on that episode about some of the promising currents in the UFCW, including to coordinate bargaining. Did you know that the UFCW negotiates hundreds of separate local agreements with like a single employer? As Lisa put it, quote, "Without coordinated bargaining, we're leaving a lot of worker power on the table."
It's kind of haunting to remember the sleeping giant descriptor for UFCW. These are workers dealing with significant issues with wages. The average retail worker makes something like less than $35,000 a year, according to BLS data in 2024.
Seriously, I mean, just imagine what sort of gains could be made if the sleeping giant was to wake up. Another episode I really liked was when we had our coworker Al Bradbury on to talk about similar currents brewing within the Letter Carriers Union, the National Association of Letter Carriers, which she covers. That was in an episode we did on April 11th last year titled "Facing Privatization and Doge Attacks, Postal Workers Are Fighting Back." NALC members who actually recently started bargaining again a few weeks ago as their current contract expires in May have been mobilizing over the past few years. They organized a Vote No campaign in 2024 and early 2025, and they've been rallying all year to fight the Trump administration's efforts to cut the Postal Service. A lot of the energy came from workers organizing over what they described as NALC leadership keeping them in the dark about how bargaining was going. But there was a lot they were fighting for, and they saw energizing the union and organizing for more member engagement and transparency from leadership as the way to do it. Al said that members were also, quote, talking about what they wanted out of the contract, like eliminating two-tier pay and how to fight back against then Postmaster General DeJoy's plans for postal consolidation, and how to get organized for the union's national convention in August in 2024.
To the point you were both making earlier, when I think about how this administration and the bosses try to overwhelm us and make us feel powerless and paralyzed, I try to remember that the fight back for this moment has already been in motion for several years now, and workers are gaining ground and consciousness. And I hope that as these campaigns develop, they bring more workers in and provide an alternative vision for an economy that works in their favor, and also how they can actually be part of making that happen. I wanted to call attention to the second half of the tagline we say at the start of each episode, that we're a weekly show on rank and file news and organizing tactics. And we've had a fair bit on the pod about organizing tactics, particularly in our Stewards Corner episodes with our coworkers, Carrie Thompson and Joe DeManuel Hall, and many of the others we've been lucky to have on. If you read the Labor Notes magazine or labornotes.org, you've seen our Stewards Corner pieces. It's a series we've run for about 40 years now, often written by and for stewards who are directly involved with members every day on the shop floor, supporting them in grievance fights and rallying them during contract campaigns. And I'm excited for us to do more Steward Corner episodes where we get to hear from shop stewards directly with questions or advice on strategies that work for them. So if that's you, send us a voice note or email us at podcast@labornotes.org. Again, that's podcast@labornotes.org. But yeah, I've loved the episodes we've done with Carrie and Joe, especially the ones on worker safety and how to make union meetings actually good. We ran the Stewards Corner episode on worker safety in October last year, and it's called Workplace Safety is Not a Game. We'll link that in the episode description, along with the other episodes that we've talked about on this show. But Carrie talked about workplace safety games that employers sometimes implement where workers can win cash prizes for having fewer reported safety issues. Carrie talks about how this not only incentivizes workers to report fewer safety problems, but also how it at least implicitly frames the issue as a matter of worker carelessness and responsibility. What we want as union members is to hear from coworkers across the shop floor about the safety issues that they regularly run into and why. Is it a lack of training and equipment? Are there hazards not being investigated or addressed promptly? Are there demanding quotas that are driving up the speed of production and creating more opportunities for accidents? These are collectively felt issues that demand a systemic solution, and one in which the boss is held accountable for maintaining adequate safety standards. Carrie talks about how it's important for members to lead on this issue through something like a union safety committee. And she talks also about how unions sometimes do bargain for committees like this that are recognized by the boss, but that there are pitfalls, like with any labor management partnership, where the boss tries to use that to push forward their own agenda. So it's important for members to be vigilant and to be able to lead and shape the conversation on safety by, as Carrie suggests, scheduling their own walkthroughs of the workplace, doing their own surveys, and before bargaining, assessing costs of safety improvements and equipment and gear and taking that to the table. And Carrie also talks about how, workplace safety is such an essential consideration beyond manufacturing and factory environments. Teachers deal with mold in school. The New York City nurses who struck just earlier this year with NYSNA, or the New York State Nurses Association, talked about workplace violence that they experience on emergency room floors, often as a consequence of long wait times that patients have to put up with. The other Stewards Corner episode, which I think is eternally relevant, especially in this era of nonstop meetings, is the one that we had Joe on for, called Stewards Corner, What If Union Meetings Were Actually Good?, which we ran in May last year. It was one of our most popular episodes, and Joe talks about how the goal of a union meeting is ultimately still organizing, so it needs to engage members. And we need to be able to talk about these meetings even to members who weren't there, instead of just expecting to have been there. And finally, on a kind of closing note, being a little, sappy here, but we're being a little self-congratulatory on the pod today as a treat. So I'll say that you both, and maybe Amy Poehler, for when we're living out a little, are some of the most wholesome pod hosts in the game right now, the goofiest and also sharpest to do it. I also love that we get to hear from you both and our coworkers. You're all super knowledgeable about your beats and dedicate a ton of time and resources into building and supporting the worker networks that you tend to. And I'm grateful to all of the workers who have talked to you both and to the staff at Labor Notes, some of whom we've been able to have on the pod, especially in recent months.
Sindhu, you know we absolutely could not do this without you. Folks listening to the pod don't know that behind the scenes, Sindhu's the one holding the whole ship together, making me and Natasha sound hopefully somewhat good every week. So Sindhu, we can't thank you enough. And yeah, one of the big roles Sindhu has played is helping us get workers on the podcast. And they've been some of my favorite moments. Like, I feel like I think every day about when Tara Arnold talked about what it felt like to walk out of the Horseshoe Indianapolis Casino in Shelbyville, Indiana, back in October as a Teamster to pressure the company to recognize the union that she had organized with her coworkers. Here's what she said.
Yes, we all set our alarms for noon and somebody got the word out. They knew it was coming. As we walked on the floor, it was nothing but intimidation. I mean, there was cops, IGC agents, executive management. They had people stay over. So the intimidation was just unreal. I mean, they wouldn't open the tables. They refused to open the tables. They sent us out on break. And as we joined outside on break, the stress level, man, people were sweating, just scared, of what are you doing it? Are you doing it? Are we really doing this? Like, it was just so overwhelming. I mean, there were tears shed. There was people that vomited because they were so just built up for this. And I'm telling you that noon struck and our alarms started going off. Our hands threw up. We told them no more work. We're going on strike. And everybody kind of looked around and one after one, everybody's hands went up. Goosebumps. And look, I'm talking about it right now. I got goosebumps, but it was a feeling that I can't even, it's so hard. It was just so powerful to just see us all. We all marched out of there. They tried to intimidate people that were still on the floor, telling them they couldn't leave before they colored people up or got the money to people. And we stuck together. I stood there by one of my girls, Katrina, and told her I wasn't leaving until she left with us. We leave as a team. We walked out together, walked through that casino and chanted on our way out, we want union and we want it now. And that whole casino heard us. It was just so powerful. There was tears. Oh my God. And as we walked out of the building, we drove off and that was the last time we left, for the strike to start. Come around the corner and we're like, are they going to be out there? Like, is this real? We pull out there and there was probably 250, 300 people out there just cheering us on, ready to go, striking with us on that first day. And we marched to the picket line together. It was so powerful. Something I've never even imagined that I would ever go through or feel ever in my life. It was amazing.
Oh, and when Sabina Aguirre from Starbucks Workers United kind of pulled back the curtain and talked about how useful practice pickets were as a tactic to build confidence among members who are newer to the labor movement. Here's what she said.
Our base is majority younger people. It's been a really great opportunity to teach new people about the importance of practice pickets because they're not as used in modern labor fights. And so bringing back that tried and true method of practice pickets has really shown us our strength prior to going into any striking and gotten people used to the discipline and the real maintenance it takes to go to a picket. You're not just showing up there and hoping things work out. We've trained. We've been prepared. People know chants. People know what things to bring. We've made signs, obviously. And it really does set people into a position where going into any sort of strikes or going into any sort of larger action, they feel like they know what they're doing and we're confident and ready to do whatever it takes to get that contract now.
Well, that's our episode. We'll link all the episodes you heard about today in the description. Please rate us or leave us a review on Apple or Spotify. If you're listening to us on Podbean at labornotespodcast.podbean.com, please download our episode. And if you have an organizing question or even more of a comment than a question, we'll take those. Email us at podcast@labornotes.org.
And we have a bunch of online events coming up next. We have our March Stewards Workshop on investigating grievances on Monday, March 16th, and our next session of What to Do When Your Union Breaks Your Heart will be on Tuesday, March 17th, on the topic of open bargaining. We also have our next contract campaign workshop series on 2 Tuesdays in April, April 14th and April 21st. You can sign up for all of those online events at labornotes.org/events.
Bay Area Labor Notes heads, don't miss a new book launch for board member Ellen David Friedman's new book, Keep Going, A Guide to Organizing When It's Hard, on March 28th at the Bay Area Longshore Memorial Association from 4 to 7. The event is free, but we'll have her book for sale, which you'll absolutely want to get your hands on. You can RSVP at tinyurl.com/keepgoingbooktalk.
The Labor Notes podcast is produced by Natasha Elena Ullman, Sindhu Sundar, and myself. Our title music was written and performed by our coworker Keith Brower Brown. See you next week. Solidarity, y'all.